Greetings, friends around the world, and welcome. This is Caravan to Midnight, the Friday night edition. We have a nice program lined up for you, although it is a little disturbing. We're going to speak with Chris Gaubatz. He is a national security consultant, and he's written a book, Muslim Mafia, which features prominently in his personal journey as a Muslim convert. Not really. You'll find out later. And then as an intern with the Hamas Organization Council on American Islamic Relations in Virginia back in 2007. Well, it was quite an eye-opening experience for him, and I'm pretty sure his story will be an eye-opening experience for you, because we're in really deep trouble. It's, I know we keep hearing this, I keep saying it, and then something happens, and everybody's horrified, and then it calms down, and people forget about it. And then something else horrible happens, and people are horrified, and then a little while later, they're calm, and they've gone back to their lives. But this is really rather disturbing. I want to read something to you that was published in thesun.co.uk. It's about this chilling letter that predicted the First and Second World Wars, and which also claimed a third global battle will be fought between the West and Islamic war leaders. A U.S. Army captain, Albert Pike, who wrote the book Morals and Dogma, the primer for 33rd degree Masons. He wrote this letter about 150 years ago and sent it to an Italian politician named Giuseppe Mazzini. It was dated August 15, 1871, and the letter pinpoints how and why the First and Second World Wars raged in the early 1900s. Now, we've heard a lot about the Freemasons, and I say again, my dad went to 32nd and was reading Morals and Dogma as he was about to go to 33rd degree. That's when the doors of illumination open to you, when you hit 33rd degree. And he quit. And I asked him why he quit. And he said, because it is a cult. And the language in some of the rituals is unacceptable. And that's all he said. And he didn't say anything more about it. I remember as a kid, he wore his pin, you know, the diamond pin, the crescent moon with the scimitar, and the ring. But he put those away, and I never saw him again. This letter claims a third and final battle against Islamic war leaders will have our nation fighting to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economical exhaustion. He wrote that Christianity would be destroyed and a one-world government established. This letter features heavily in former naval officer William Guy Carr's book, Satan, Prince of This World. According to the book, Pike's letter suggested World War I would take place to overthrow the czars in Russia and to make the country a fortress of communism. Now remember, this was written in 1871. Well, that happened, didn't it? It then told how World War II would destroy Nazism, so communism could overthrow weaker governments. And that happened also. He also predicted a sovereign state of Israel would be instilled in Palestine. And that happened. Allegedly, it's stated. Now, I don't know why the author has chosen to put it allegedly stated. It either stated or it didn't. This is by Haley Richardson. The First World War must be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati to overthrow the power of the czars in Russia and of making that country a fortress of atheistic communism. The divergences caused by the agenteurs, the agents of the Illuminati, between the British and Germanic empires will be used to foment this war. At the end of the war, communism will be built and used in order to destroy the other governments and in order to weaken the religions. The Second World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences between the fascists and the political Zionists. This war must be brought about so that Nazism is destroyed and that the political Zionism be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel in Palestine. During the Second World War, international communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which would then be restrained and held in check until the time when we need it for the final social cataclysm. Chillingly, the author writes here, Pike then predicted a third world war, which he said, quote, must be fomented by taking advantages of the differences caused by the agents of the Illuminati between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. He continued, the war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the Muslim Arabic world, and political Zionism, the State of Israel, mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economic exhaustion. We shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and of the most bloody turmoil. Then, everywhere, the citizens, obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries, will exterminate those destroyers of civilization, and the multitude, disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will from that moment be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out in the public view. This manifestation will result from a general reactionary movement which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. It's been claimed the text was once on show at the British Museum's library, but mysteriously removed in the 1970s and never seen again. However, the British Museum and the British Library state there is no record of the letter being in the establishment's possession. Well, of course not. You know, things disappear routinely from the Smithsonian and from the National Archives. Bill and Hillary know all about that. The nihilists. What is a nihilist? A nihilist is someone who believes in the annihilation of people, but people are the problem. People are the scourge on the face of the earth. Well, behold, ladies and gentlemen, let's start with this bunch of idiots, and that's a big bunch too, about 100,000 of them, just raising hell in Hamburg, Germany. They're doing this in observance of the G20 summit. And this is what one little bastardo said. There are these things called black bloc activists, and they hope to ignite chaos across the West. And they're prepared to clash violently with police and military if necessary. And here's a quote. With 200 people, we have shown to millions of people that it's possible to bring people onto the streets and make clear we are not going to simply accept everything decided by the people at the top. That was one unnamed activist in Hamburg. And we believe that we have brought across a pretty good message, that it's possible to protest, and there is no need to be scared of the police. Some of the anti-capitalist leftist types are staging zombie marches to demonstrate their political apathy. Do you see the insanity of this? They're staging zombie marches to demonstrate their political apathy. But it seems to me that the fact that they are involved in a demonstration or a protest is in fact political activism. So it's more no-gain, moronic behavior from people who have nothing better to do. A lot of people were injured. Politico recently dubbed German Chancellor Angela Merkel the leader of the free world. But Hamburg is just another reminder of how quickly Germany is spiraling out of control under her leadership. In fact, Denmark is pretty ticked off because her stupid policies are endangering Denmark. And they are. Absolutely, positively are. Now, if you go over here to Jihad Watch, not very complimentary of Angela Merkel. Nikolai Senels writes, published today, border control and immigration is on the G20 agenda this weekend. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, probably the worst leader in Europe since Hitler when it comes to European security, is endangering the whole region with her liberal immigration policy. Surely, Mr. Trump, and especially Eastern European leaders, are worried. Right? Well, they should be. As you know, President Trump is meeting with President Putin. But let's carry on with this thing about Eastern Europe. Intelligence services in Europe and the U.S. have long warned that Islamic jihadis are among the refugees coming to the West. Danish Security and Intelligence Service is now criticizing Merkel's and Sweden's refugee policies with direct warnings that they destabilize security in the region. This might lead to the end of the Nordic Passport Union, which has since 1954 allowed Scandinavian citizens to travel freely among their countries without travel documents. But that could be coming to an end because of little fat girl Angela Merkel, who looks more like a man every day. Not to criticize one of the Lord's creatures, but it was an easy shot, so I took it. She looks like an idiot, and she is an idiot. She's destroying her country. And who's running her? Whose idea was it to infuse Western civilization, which was established by Christians, by the way? The civilization that everybody knows and enjoys, at least up until the refugee crisis, this latest unpleasantness. Civilization was established primarily by Christians. It's just the way it is. Somebody wants to argue or type an email with their middle fingers, they're all mad. Well, read something besides your own writing. Go and read an actual history book, not one that's been redacted or changed for political reasons. And you'll find that that's absolutely true. So, this old gal is destroying her country. The idiots in Sweden are destroying their country. The Italians, at least, have sent some armored vehicles down to the border region to at least control somewhat what is otherwise chaos, because the refugees continue to come. Oh, here we go. I guess you heard that Trudeau's government just turned over $10,500,000 to a murderer, a jihadi. In Austria, a man who committed a gruesome murder of a couple turns out to be a radical Islamic jihadi. That disgusting Linda Sarsour, more on her later. She led the Women's March. Oh, it's all about jihad with her. But she talks out of both sides of her mouth. Peace. We want peace. And then on the other side, we're not here to assimilate into your society, but to carry on our jihad. Well, well, well. Okay. Whatever she says. In the meantime, we have our own government, right? Now, this source is cnbc.com. And the author is Jacob Pramuk, P-R-A-M-U-K. So, President Donald Trump opened today's 2-hour and 15-minute meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin by pressing him about Moscow's attempts to interfere in the 2016 election, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said. Trump started by raising the concerns of the American people over Russian meddling and pressed Mr. Putin on the issue on more than one occasion, according to Mr. Tillerson, who sat in on the meeting on the sidelines at the G20 summit in Germany. President Putin again denied trying to influence the election. Mr. Trump said, President Putin and I have been discussing various things, and I think it's going very well. We had some very, very good talks. We're going to have a talk now, and obviously that will continue, but we look forward to a lot of very positive things happening for Russia and the United States and for everybody concerned. It appears they've struck a deal on they've struck a deal on a ceasefire arrangement in Syria. So more on that later, as details become available. Yep, more than an hour and 20 minutes after the meeting, the AP reported that the U.S. and Russia reached an agreement for a ceasefire in southwest Syria that would start this Sunday. Before the meeting, Mr. Trump added it was an honor to be with Putin. Putin said he was delighted to meet with Trump personally before the pair shook hands and the throng of reporters and photographers left. Mr. Trump did not answer shouted questions about whether he would confront Putin about Russian efforts to interfere in the 2016 election. Because you see, people in the press these days, about 90% of them are abject morons. They're like mentally retarded parrots that just repeat the same thing over and over and over again. Now, on Thursday, top Senate Democrats urged Trump to press Putin about the 2016 election, saying, quote, not raising this matter with President Putin would be a severe dereliction of the duty of the office to which you were elected. I have one thing to say to the Democrats in general. Go screw yourselves. You are a bunch of weak-minded morons. All of you, almost to a person. This idiot who looks insane, I'm not even going to speak his name at the moment. I mean, you talk about a twisted and distorted individual. Anybody can have a bad photograph taken of them, not very flattering photograph taken. But this person looks literally insane. Oh, he wants to see if he can get Congress to remove Trump for psychological reasons. This is the insane left. And then that blithering moron, Maxine Waters, and the drooling moron, Nancy Pelosi, that little rat, Harry Reid, not Barney Frank, who's that other one, Al Franken, yeah, that's a failed comedian, and an even worse politician. All aided and abetted by what we used to call the mainstream media, which I've lightened up a bit to Ministry of Smoke and Mirrors. They really minister to themselves. CNN's numbers are worse than cartoon shows, reruns of them, from the early to mid-'60s. The pressure needs to be kept on CNN, MSNBC, and the 3 other major networks that we're simply not going to buy what they're selling, and we're not going to buy the products of the sponsors which advertise on their programs. We are going to run them out of business. And unlike the big remember the big homosexual assault on Chick-fil-A? Family-run business, Christian outfit. All they did was make their year in about a week. Because you see, people who are basically righteous people, they are basically righteous. Oh, they're all flawed, certainly. Every human being is. There's only been one perfect man ever walked the face of the earth. That's it. That would be Jesus. The rest of us, it's a constant gardening thing. We're always having to get rid of the weeds and the bugs. A little sin here, a little deceit there, a little misrepresentation there. If you don't have a conscience about these things, then you need to get one. That's the last thing you need to lose, is your conscience and your ability to balance between what is ethical and what is moral. In a conversation I had with the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki. Just a private conversation the other weekend in Bozeman, Montana. He talked about a Vietnamese kid who had a satchel charge, TNT in a pack, and tossed it into his helicopter, and Robert caught him. So he pulled out his pistol. He was going to kill this kid who was 10 years old, but he didn't. And after that, he decided that there would be no more fighting because he said, ethically, I should have shot him. Morally, I could not. And he was right. We need to take a look at that moral compass and also our ethical compass. Sometimes unpleasant duties must be performed, because if you don't, it'll sabotage your entire operation, whatever it is, whether it's a business, whether it's a family, or whether it's your own personal life. So now the Democrats are going to talk about a severe dereliction of duty after 8 years of that loser, Bones Obama? Really? These people need to be rejected. And the proof that they can be rejected, pushed into a corner, and permanently removed from having any voice, is what happened with Chick-fil-A. Oh, the gays just thought they had this. You're anti-gay, so we're going to put you out of business. Didn't work. None of it's working. The only way this leftist nonsense can work is if we continue to allow it. We continue to pay attention to it. We continue, by our viewership, to support networks that display this stuff as if it's important. Oh, more men are wearing brassieres and painting their toenails. I don't care. I don't care what you do in the privacy of your own home, provided it does not hurt anyone else, particularly a child. As for pedophiles, people who do things like homosexually rape a 4-year-old boy or heterosexually rape a 4-year-old girl, and these things happen, these people need to be put to death. Plain and simple. Just kill them and send them back to Father as soon as possible. That's what needs to happen. You know, I was driving yesterday after the program, and there's this black guy, an older black guy, real bitter, angry-looking old black guy standing in the corner. He's holding a sign that said, "Don't judge." Let me explain something that you may have forgotten or may not have ever known. I'll remind you of something in case you've forgotten. I'll explain something in case you've never known it. This thing about, well, it says in the Bible that you shouldn't judge. No. No. How can you make a determination whether or not you want to be around certain people if you don't make judgments about their conduct or the activities they engage in? What it states in Scripture is that be careful with judgment, because by the same measuring stick that you measure others, you're going to be measured by that same stick. You may not look too good when that stick that you used on others is used on you. The only one who is capable of judging righteously is God. Well, that makes perfect sense. Fine. But we have that free will, and so we make our choices. Right? Absolutely. Now, MSNBC, Rachel Eraserhead Maddow. From thedailycaller.com, someone sent Rachel Maddow fake NSA documents alleging Trump-Russia collusion. MSNBC host, or would that be hostess? No, I think in her case it's definitely host. Rachel Maddow gave a heads up to other news organizations on Thursday after she was sent what she believes are faked National Security Agency documents alleging collusion, right? Maddow said in a lengthy segment on her show, every segment on her show is lengthy. Somebody, for some reason, appears to be shopping a fairly convincing fake NSA document that purports to directly implicate somebody from the Trump campaign in working with the Russians in their attack on the election. Well, there wasn't any attack on the election. It's simply that the American people rose up and pushed your scumbag candidate, Hillary Clinton, off the stage, ruining her chances for ever sitting in a significant political office ever again. If there was any collusion, I really don't want to say this very many more times. I'm pretty sure you're tired of hearing it too. But let's get this straight, shall we? The only collusion between the Russians was between Hillary Clinton and Rosatom selling off 20% of our uranium deposits to the Russians. James Comey was obviously, it's obvious to me, the FBI director, the former FBI director, who is now gone. Oh, he was afraid there were going to be some tapes, so he was rather forthcoming at the hearing, wasn't he? Well played, Mr. Trump. Very well played. Pretty clear to me he was in Hillary Clinton's pocket. And he comes over from Lockheed Martin. Major heavy-duty defense contractor. Well, no possible collusion, conflicts of interest, or any of that there, right? Not a bit. It's amazing, but true. And now, let's go over here. Oh, yes. There you are. Trudeau's government. What's all this about? Connect the dots, Jambi. The government, the media, and the invasion of Western civilization by the Muslims, who claim to be peace-loving, but they're not. Look at their part of the world. Well, it was the Crusades. You don't know what you're talking about. You know nothing about the Crusades if you think that they're angry at us over the Crusades. Oh, they're angry at us about them, all right, but not for the reasons that you might think. They're angry over the Crusades because we drove them back out of Western Europe. White Christian men drove them back out of Europe. We must plunge our knives into the chests and bellies of the infidel, which means they stab the men in the chest and they stab the women in the belly. Nice, huh? They are savages. I think they are sprung from the loins of Satan himself. They beat their wives so they will mind their ways. They kill their daughters, particularly in honor killings, because maybe she met somebody at public school and would like to go on a date with him. No, that's not going to work. They killed this model guy over there because he wore long hair, wore tight-fitting clothes, and just had too many female friends, so they just murdered him. He was going to be a contestant in a, I guess you'd call it a beauty pageant. I've never heard of a handsome pageant. But anyway, they just killed this kid. End of story. And now the Trudeau government, the idiot Justin Trudeau, has already quietly paid $10,500,000 to jihad murderer Omar Khadr, K-H-A-D-R, by Christine Douglas Williams. Never mind the 50,000-strong petition against the Trudeau government, calling upon Trudeau not to award the notorious jihadist Omar Khadr $10.5 million of taxpayer money, and never mind the injunction filed by the widow of Chris Spears, whom Khadr murdered, and by Lane Morris, whom Khadr blinded in a grenade attack to block that money being paid out. Nope, the Trudeau government has already quietly paid $10.5 million to this jihad murderer, and the check has already been cashed, according to a source involved in the transaction. I'm not making this up. This makes the injunction moot, Canadians had no say in the matter, even those who can't afford to feed their children 3 meals a day and can't afford prescription medication or dental care. This sends a rather loud message to jihadists. The younger you start them, the better, since they will be held less accountable and may well profit if anyone tries to interrogate them. Their rights trump all, including those of the innocent people they kill. So why frown on young Palestinian jihadists who are being trained to blow up Israelis at summer camp? They too will be rewarded by the Palestinian Authority, which receives billions of dollars in charity money, including money from taxpayers in the West. Omar Khadr is in good company, and thanks to the Trudeau government, he is now a rich man, having earned $10.5 million from the maiming of Morris and the murder of Chris Spear, who was only 28 years old and the father of 2 young children when Khadr killed him. Pretty disgusting. Globe and Mail from yesterday. The Trudeau government has quietly paid a $10.5 million settlement to Omar Khadr in a move that circumvents legal efforts by 2 Americans to prevent him from receiving compensation for abuses he suffered as a teenager at the U.S. military detention facility at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. The payout to Mr. Khadr and his legal team was given on Wednesday and cashed immediately, according to a source involved in the transaction. Legal settlements do not fall under taxable income, so Mr. Khadr will not have to pay taxes on the $10.5 million. Mr. Khadr's Toronto lawyer, John Phillips, said when asked by the Globe and Mail on Thursday to confirm the payment, "I'm not in a position to comment." Justice Department lawyer Barney Brucker also refused to comment. The payment halts efforts by lawyers for the widow of a U.S. Delta Force sergeant and a retired U.S. Special Forces soldier from seeking an emergency injunction to stop Ottawa from giving the multi-million-dollar settlement to Mr. Khadr and his lawyers. Notice the scumbag is always Mr., 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 but they refer to the president just as Trump. This is the disrespectful, disgusting left. This is journalism at its abject lowest. The injunction is moot. It is absolutely moot, University of Ottawa law professor Amir Attaran told the Globe. Plus, if they're smart, that money is not sitting in Omar Khadr's name. It is sitting in a trust fund or is sitting in a corporation or some other structure, and good luck in enforcing against that. So what do you think of this? What do you make of it? I should probably give you a heads up on something. I'm going to continue to remind this audience that I'm not lucky to have you. I'm blessed to have you. This isn't luck. This is a blessing to be able to talk to you and sometimes with you about the things that threaten everything. We have a corrupt government. Yes, I know the Republicans are pretty much Sierra Hotel India Tango also, but they're not in the concentrated form that the Democrats are in. The Democrats have always been a pain in the backside. Always. Ridiculous, impracticable ideas, and they're really interested in moving towards socialism. Why? Because they are 2 things, in my opinion: stupid and ignorant. That's a dangerous combination. The ignorance comes from they don't even know what they're talking about. And the stupid part is, when it comes to things like socialism, they do know what they're talking about. And they've seen it not work over and over and over again. Venezuela is the latest example of socialism's failure. And communism, where misery, absolute misery, was evenly distributed to every Soviet citizen, and today, every Chinese citizen. but we do business with them. We're enemies with the Russians, but we do all kinds of... It's not communist Russia anymore, but it is communist China. And who do we do the bulk of our dealings with? With the communist Chinese. Can anybody explain this? Cheap labor. Oh, is that it? So for cheap labor, you're willing to enrich the Chinese communists, who are liable to go off on you over anything from disputed islands to Taiwan to North Korea. Why won't the Chinese deal with North Korea? All it would take is a phone call, because they don't want to deal with North Korea. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, the destruction of this country and every man, woman, and child, particularly Christians and Jews, in that order, this destruction is wanted by the savages of the earth. Yes, I understand. Do they not laugh when they're tickled? Do they not cry when you slap them? Do they not attack you if you surprise them with a swift kick in the rump? Well, certainly they do, because, after all, we're all people. But we are definitely not all equal. We're not. We are equal under the law in this country and in the sight of God, mostly. Mostly. Well, all people are equal on the sight of God, yes, as his creations. You remember Jesus said something, and I believe that thing he said was, no, I don't think so. You are of your father, the devil. Some of the people who are walking this earth right now are most assuredly of their father, the devil. Devil, you mean like the little red guy in the front of the ham cans, what do you call it, deviled ham? Get it, deviled ham? You mean the guy in the red union suit with the tail and the pitchfork and the horns? No, that's not what he looks like. You know that's not what he looks like. That's a cartoon. That's a caricature. The devil is an unseen force. Oh, I'm not interested in religion. I'm interested in the paranormal. What? Yeah, I like Bigfoot. Well, go find one, and if you do, we'll talk about it. But you won't, so I'm not holding my breath until that conversation occurs. There is a force of evil in this world. This world is ruled by Satan. Some of the people in government and in finance, in authority, they pray to Satan. They are Satanists. Now you and I might go, oh, that's so silly, that's just ridiculous. Well, it's not silly where they're concerned. They're very, very serious about it. Blood sacrifices, no problem. Ritual killings, no problem. Sacrifices of all kind. Defiling of children, no problem. Pedophilia, no problem. Murder, no problem. Remember, Satan took Jesus up on this mountain and said, see all of this? I'll give you dominion over all of it. All you have to do is worship me. That's all you got to do. Well, what does that tell you that he was even in a position to try and make a deal like that with Lord Jesus? It means that he had the authority to give Jesus dominion over all of this material wealth. All of it. If you're not an authority, you can't really assign dominion over it to anybody else, can you? So that means he is an authority. And when you see the insanity of the left, when you see these 100,000 people come into Hamburg, and what are they doing? They're destroying. Because they're going to demonstrate that they're not going to accept what these people who are in charge of things, they're not going to obey them or recognize them as authority or anything else. So does that mean that we should recognize the protesters and demonstrators and rioters? Are we supposed to acknowledge them as our leaders? You can get in trouble by inciting people to violence. But it's quite another thing to warn people, and I am warning you. You may not be interested in war. You may not be interested in Islam. You may not give a damn about jihadis, or jihad, or the caliphate. But the aforementioned things are very interested in you in one respect. They want you dead. They want your families dead. They want your children dead. They want your house destroyed. They want you erased from existence. Because in my opinion, Islam is the religion of Satan, and nothing more, and nothing less. So by way of a heads up, understand that we had better get ready. And we better remain ready, because it's coming. This country is covered with mosques. And when we talk to Chris, I want to bring up the possibility that many of these mosques are actually armories, training centers. Certainly they're indoctrination centers. But that's got nothing to do with us. I talked with somebody recently that, and this is the duality of mind that some of these people have. Went to Paris, went to Normandy. It was breathtaking. It was excellent. Well, how was Paris? Well, didn't want to say anything like, well, it's in a shambles. Well, where we were, there weren't any problems. Well, I'm talking about the Champs-Élysées. I'm talking about the main drag through Paris. You know, with the Arc de Triomphe and all that. What about that? How's that looking? Oh, well, that's really quite bad. Oh, yeah, but where you were was okay. But the most famous street in France, that's a shambles. But we don't want to mention that. We want to accentuate the positive. It is time for a reality check. Maybe this one will clear, because the other reality checks have just flat out bounced. These maniacs, morons, and idiots in government need to be removed. These maniacs, idiots, and liars, these propagandists, need to be removed from media. And if necessary, the media outlet itself needs to be driven into bankruptcy. Now, granted, many of these media companies are busy driving themselves into bankruptcy. Because instead of taking product to you that you want, they want to pull you into their jackpot. When you don't respond, well, the money just goes down. But they just don't get it. Maybe if enough of them are fired, and maybe if enough of these companies go out of business, maybe they will get it then. But I don't think so. It's going to require a change in personnel. We don't need more sensitive people, unless they're sensitive to what is required for the civilization to survive, let alone succeed. Now, I'm pretty sure that I'm preaching to the choir here, and I'm sure you've heard this sermon before, just maybe a little variation of the theme. But we're getting very, very close to something. And notice, the moment that some accord is reached with an enemy like Russia, that's going to be the trigger. Getting along, restoring peace in a ceasefire in Syria, improving anything on the world stage is the trigger. It's the indicator that something outrageous needs to happen. Another terrorist attack. That's the most likely. It's the one you get the most mileage out of. Everybody knows that. So what do we do? Accept the status quo? Or do we do the same thing that we did on election night? and run these mugs out of town. We're always going to have idiots in our midst, always. We're always going to have people that have a warped ideology, a warped philosophy, a warped regard for life. Those people will always be with us. Just as is written in Scripture, the poor will always be with you. So judging a person is one thing. Recognizing a widespread problem is another. This nation is made up of individuals, but without the cohesiveness of a nation, individuality falls away and gives way to mob mentality. Not individual mentality, mob mentality. You don't want that. That way tribalism and all the problems that go with it lie. We're a country, all right, minus a few letters. Let us endeavor to be a nation again. And when we recognize that another nation, like the nation of Islam, is incompatible with our nation, then let us work together to remove it and its influences and its destructive components that go with it from our civilization and never allow it to enter again. And if that means that some of our favorite actors or rock stars or politicians or what have you, our favorite celebrities, well, they're okay with Islam. Well, they're stupid because they don't know that Islam is not okay with them, unless they've decided to follow Muhammad, which means that they're willing to visit upon you the same violence that these anonymous, largely anonymous and unknown jihadis deliver on strangers every day, some part of the world. Quit watching their movies, quit listening to their music, quit going to their concerts. Stop supporting people who do not support you. Is that judgment? You bet it is. There is such a thing as good judgment. Good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from bad judgment. And right now, we are gaining experience from the bad judgment of letting an entirely incompatible ideology and population into our civilization. So let's convert that to good judgment and let's deal with this problem effectively, decisively, and might I say, permanently. I hope you'll consider joining Caravan to Midnight as a member. We are entirely member-supported. We couldn't do it without our members. We are free from corporate influence, and we shall remain free from corporate influence. I don't care if I have to do it from a pop tent out in the bush somewhere with a sat phone. There will be no corporate influence. There will be no sponsor influence. Sponsors, if any should present themselves, will roll with our program, or we will not roll together. It's just how it is. We roll with the Caravanners. We are a family. We help each other. We help veterans. We contribute to worthy causes. We stay in touch with our members through the usual social media platforms. Might as well use them. They are there. I was against it for a long time. I started it and I went away from it. I thought, you know, if we don't participate in conversations over Facebook, then when something happens that people might like to know about, we won't be able to tell them. And even when something like what's happening now, some of the comments are being censored on Facebook. But see, I can come onto this program and tell you what kinds of things are being censored and rat out Facebook for doing the censorship number on us. So it's not a one-way deal here. It's a two-way street. We, the crew, a Caravan to Midnight, and the Caravan family. Okay? It's a symbiotic relationship. The Caravan to Midnight family relies on us to bring them good, solid, substantive conversations, and we rely on the members of the Caravan family to keep us going. And so far, it's worked out pretty well, and it's working out better and better all the time as new members come on all the time. With more new members, we can do more. You can't believe what's involved in an operation like this. I've said it before, but it's everything from licensing to the electric bill, everything in between. Legal, insurance, blah, blah, blah. You can't imagine. I didn't imagine before I got into it. When I looked at it, before we were about to launch, it was, okay, well, everybody buckle in, because all of this has to be covered, all of it. And so we do, thanks to you. So, did I mention we'd love to have you as a member? Stand by for Chris Gaubatz. This should be very